Today, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court heard oral arguments regarding the elimination of absentee ballot drop boxes. In July of 2022, the State Supreme Court ruled that absentee ballot drop boxes may only be placed in election offices and that no one other than the voter can return the ballot in person. The plaintiff in the case, liberal voter mobilization group Priorities USA, argues the previous ruling set a dangerous precedent regarding the legality of off-site ballot drop boxes. The defendant, the Wisconsin State Legislature, argues that the previous opinion correctly interprets statute that states ballots may only be returned to elections clerks and that there's been no evidence that the decision has made it harder to oversee elections or cast a ballot in Wisconsin.
What the opinion says is that because drop boxes were not authorized expressly, they are not allowed. And it relied on 6.84 to reach that conclusion. And that is an enormous problem that threatens future elections in this state.
There's absolutely no evidence before the court, competent evidence of any negative consequences that have resulted, that there has been any problem administering elections in 2022.
Though the legislature authorized the use of drop boxes during the COVID-19 pandemic, it now argues that over time, the use of them has presented problems not previously considered. The court's ruling is expected to come within 3 months of the August 13th primary and within 6 months of the November presidential election.